This screencast is to walk you through how to complete the CA outline assignment in Schoology. So first of all, CA stands for culminating activity. So in this assignment, we are going to be outlining your culminating activity textbook chapter. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to want to go back and watch the video that provides an overview of the Unit 1 culminating activity, and then come on back to this video. So your first step is to open up the culminating activity outline in Schoology. Once you're looking at this page, you're going to click on My Document where mine says In Progress, yours will say My Document. Once you have that open, you're going to be looking at a blank document. That is on purpose. So I'm going to walk you through what to do with this blank document in order to be able to submit it. So our first step is to come up with a title for our chapter. So think about what you might want to call your chapter based on your task. So again, as a refresher, our task is to create a textbook chapter about the world of The Great Gatsby and the time period in which it takes place. So in your outline, you're going to come over, maybe make it bold. So you want to clearly label, this is my title, and insert a title. So that might have to do with the book, the time period, a combination of both. You might get kind of creative with it. Your title can be anything you want it to be, and you can always change it later. So don't spend too much time thinking about what you're going to title it. For the purpose of this screencast, I'm going to be outlining my assignment based on a different book so that you can kind of still have your own ideas and not just copy what's down in the screencast. So for my title, I'm going to do mine on Of Mice and Men. So I'll title it Of Mice and Men and the Great Depression. So that encapsulates the book and the time period, and I'm ready to move on. So take a second and add your title to your document. Your next step, once you've got your title in, is to add your big ideas. So what are the major things that you're going to need to include in your chapter? And you're going to start a list in your document. So I'm going to head back over to my outline. And to start a list, I'm going to come up to where I've got the numbers, and I'm going to use the drop-down menu here and select letters. And I'm going to start thinking of the major topics that I have to include. So these are going to be the things that make up the big headings in my chapter. Obviously, I'm going to start with an introduction. And let's take a look at our purpose. So we need some historical context, a major theme, the role the setting plays in the theme, and the lasting impact. So I'm going to start mine with historical context. And for me, that's going to be the 1930s. And then I'm going to talk from historical context. I'm going to talk about how that context plays out in the book. So I'll talk about the 1930s role in text. And that will kind of lead me from the setting to how the setting is in the book to the theme. So my D section is going to be theme. And then lastly, I'll have my conclusion, which will include the lasting impact. So yours might be very similar to mine at this point. You could even just swap out 1930s for 1920s. But these are the major sections that we're going to have based on the assignment page and these bullet points here. So take a minute and fill out your big ideas in your document. Your next step is to take those big ideas and think about how you're going to chunk them into smaller ideas. So you've got your big headings. What are the subheadings going to be? So you're going to come back over to your outline, and to add another layer of your outline, Place your cursor at the end of the row, press enter on your keyboard, and then press tab. And that creates a new layer to this outline. So in my introduction, I'm going to provide a summary of the text and some background on the author and the year it was published. So this book was written in the 1930s and it takes place in the 1930s. So that's why I think that the year it was published is something that I should include in my introduction. And then that can kind of naturally lead me into my historical context section. So, for historical context in the 1930s, I want to think about some big major things that happened in my time period for historical context. So, for you, for Great Gatsby, that's going to look different than mine for Of Mice and Men. But some things that I know were happening during this time include the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and its effect on migrant workers, and segregation and sexism. And all three of these large categories, the Great Depression, Dust Bowl and migrant workers, segregation and sexism, all three of those play out in the text. So I don't need to go out and like research extra things that are happening in the 1930s. I just want to focus on the things that are most relevant to what I read. So you are going to add your historical context and those big major events for the 1920s for Great Gatsby into your outline. Once you've got your historical context filled in, you're then going to start thinking about how that plays out in the text. So, for example, the Great Depression is really important in Of Mice and Men because our characters are in search of jobs. They're trying to save up to buy a ranch. And that's a really unrealistic goal because they're not making a lot of money. So, that is something that I would talk about in how the 1930s is playing out in the text. So, I could summarize that by saying um, the economic hardships of the characters. And I can also talk about the importance of keeping a job because they have been fired from a job and they end up going to look for a new one. So that plays out in the text. And then I can also talk about the discrimination that different characters face. So, under segregation and sexism, I'll talk about the historical context of that. But then in my next section, in the C section, I'm going to talk specifically about how that plays out in the text. So, for each of these, I kind of just took my B points and refined them into how they play out in the text. So, they're kind of in the same order. The next step is to think about the theme. There is a list in Schoology of all the themes that my first and seventh period classes came up with for The Great Gatsby. So when you get to your theme, you can come back over to this culminating activity folder. And within that, you're looking for project resources and then class list of themes. And you're going to select a theme that best connects to the historical context that you feel you can write about. So look at the list, find one that fits you, that you're writing about, that you agree with, things like that, and you will add that to your outline. So for the theme for Of Mice and Men, one major theme that I can connect easily to the historical context is the idea that the American dream is a lie that we tell ourselves. to remain hopeful. So that theme is going to look different depending on what you're talking about in your historical context and what you choose to write about. So you can pick anything from that list, add it to your outline. Then the last thing is the lasting impact. So in your lasting impact section, you are going to want to add details about why it is we are still reading this text. So we can talk about what we learned from reading the book. We can talk about why we still read the book. Um, some people have opted to write about the references to this book in pop culture and modern society. And you could also talk about why the theme is still important and relevant. So you definitely don't need to include all of these things in your conclusion. That would be a lot for just a conclusion, but those are just some ideas of things that you could include in your conclusion. As long as you're hitting that idea from the assignment page that this book has a lasting impact. So that is in your orange section, discuss the lasting impact of the theme in today's society. So how you discuss that is up to you, but that would be a good, in your conclusion, is a good spot for that to go. So once you have all of your big ideas filled out and all of your small ideas filled out, so we've got our big ideas with the capital letters and our small ideas with the lowercase letters. Our next step is to start thinking about the types of media that we're going to include to help enhance each section. So you're just going to add some ideas under your small ideas in your outline. Some types of media that you might decide to include are images, videos, GIFs, audio, graphs, timelines, primary source excerpts, block quotes. So anything that's not just a wall of text that you want to include. So you're going to head over to your outline again. And for example, background on the author, I might decide to include a picture of the author. So again, I'm going to press enter and tab to add another layer to this. And I'll say my media will be a picture of the author. Maybe under Dust Bowl, I want a video of the wind. So you'll just go through and start thinking about what types of media you want to include in each section and add those to your outline as well. Once your outline has a title, all of the main ideas, smaller chunks for the main ideas, and brainstorm for your media, you are finished with your outline and you can submit it to Schoology. So once yours looks like this, you're good to go to submit. The next screencast will walk you through using your outline to start creating your draft.